Good afternoon. I'm Caroline Jackson Smith, Professor of Theater and Africana Studies at Oberlin College, welcoming you to our special program. We're very excited to partner with Oberlin-Wellington Rescue Theater Project and the Wilson Bruce Evans Home Historical Society to bring you this look into the 1850s in Oberlin, a particularly exciting time when many freed people of color had come out of slavery to establish themselves and to help to build this town. And together with Oberlin College professors and students and local citizens, aggressive abolitionism was practiced. And one of the best examples of that moment of activism was the rescue of John Price. John Price was a young man who had walked up out of slavery to Oberlin on his bad leg and who had found solace here, though not without difficulty. And when he was attempted to be captured back into slavery, several hundred local citizens were able to thwart that effort and rescue him at the Wellington Hotel. So today, we're going to get an update on what's happening with our theater project based on the rescue and what's happening in the restoration of the Wilson Bruce Evans home. And before we get started, I would like to thank the people who have helped to make this program possible. The board of the Wilson Bruce Evans Home Historical Society, the founders and executive committee of the Oberlin-Wellington Rescue Theater Project, the Oberlin College Theater Department, the Oberlin College Africana Studies Department, the Oberlin Heritage Center, the Oberlin African American Genealogy and History Group, Oberlin College Archives, the City of Oberlin Department of Development, Michael Holabar and Hallie Davis Holabar, creators of Henry's Box, and the Oberlin Public Library. I'd like to introduce Eric Stagel, who is Managing Director of the Oberlin-Wellington Theater Project, the Oberlin-Wellington Rescue Theater Project, and he's also the Managing Director and Executive Director of our theater department here at Oberlin College. Turning it over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Caroline. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us and taking some time out your weekend afternoon. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Oberlin-Wellington Rescue Theater Project, we are an organization dedicated to creating an outdoor summer theater experience in Lorain County, staging plays that explore American history and identity through the lens of finding transformational meaning for today. I am going to drop a link into the chat if any of you are interested in checking out our website. Updates on our end include the recently finished and highly lauded run of performances by our playwright Ifa Baeza for her 3 shows that comprise the Till trilogy. These shows were at the Mosaic Theater Company in DC. And again, dropping a link in the chat. Last summer, we had Ifa along with Karamu House Artistic Director Tony Sias and choreographer Diane McIntyre, along with a company of amazing actors and community members and residents here at the college for a couple of days as we continued to develop the script that Ifa is working on for our show that now has the working title of The Rescue of John Price. As part of that process, and thanks to the Oberlin Heritage Center, we also participated in Oberlin and Lorain's Juneteenth celebrations. This April, Ifa will be in Ohio to begin a 3-month creative residency, thanks to the support of Lorain County Community Foundation. She will have time to write, research, and share excerpts from her play in progress around the area. So look forward to more information around that. To conclude our brief update, we are thrilled to announce that we have received a significant contribution from the Fisher family in support of this summer's showcase and beyond. The gift has been made in honor of Gay Fisher, who cherished her years at Oberlin College in the 50s, deeply loved theater, and was a member of the Kendall at Oberlin community. So a deep, amazing thank you to Michael Fisher and Suzanne Wilkinson. We look forward to their continuing participation in our organization. That's all I have.
Thanks, Eric, so much. Over here at Oberlin College, without Eric's management of theater, dance, and opera, we would have a much less rich program. He and Deborah Wise have been the two people who have given most of their time and energy to the development of this Oberlin-Wellington Rescue Theater project. So to let you know a little bit more about what's going on with the development of the play, we have two actors here, Joshua Jackson and this is Joshua, and Remsen Welch, who you'll meet in a minute. And they're going to perform 3 excerpts from the play in progress by Ifa Baeza entitled The Rescue of John Price. The first excerpt you'll hear is John Price himself in his cabin in Oberlin before the rescue happens, before the slave catchers come for him. And he's really contemplating what is freedom to him. And he's also imagining his cousin Dinah, who will come into the scene for a moment.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua, and I will be reading a few of these excerpts for you today. Gonna fight for freedom. I've been fighting that battle all my natural life. Were they coming up to greet me, or just gonna let me pass on by? Just on the horizon, just another poor stranger on this path, on the road to Zion. Gonna walk that road till I breathe my last. But I got no way of knowing if I be coming or going. Looking for freedom, yes, looking for freedom town. Bound for freedom till you lay me in this cold, hard ground. Gonna fight for freedom, for what is natural and right. Till it's God's law over this land, I can live as a free man. Live free as a man. From morning till night. Free. What that mean? Infant, John, valueless. Infirmed I was with neither ma nor pa. I should have been left to die. Reverend Fairchild say I am witness to God's mercy.
'Tweren't no act of God, but a horse doctor trying to ease your mother out the breach, pulling you out with them forceps by the leg. Killed her, destroyed your pa, mangled you, coming out bawling on a river of blood. I couldn't bear to tell you that. Me, who always talking.
I must have been spared for something, besides just to stay alive. Labored twice as hard to meet the match of any able man. Twice as long to match the work, prove my worth, depend on myself and no one else. And now that it's true, cousin Dinah, the one soul who knew me, now took another path. All that I would have has already been taken from me. I am free, yet still trapped here in this body, in this room, in this place. The only way to be free seems the only way to get free means to disappear. The only way to be myself is to be like I'm not here. That ain't hardly likely now with his foot. That boy Johnny, he don't know whether he coming or going.
Thank you, Joshua. John Price struggled while he was in Oberlin. He struggled to find work. He struggled with his disability. And yet, when the townspeople and the college participants were able to come to his rescue. He was able to, we hope, find a new life. We think he made it to Canada, and certainly in the play that Aoife has written, we may get to imagine that that's what he did. Well, one of the most exciting things about the Oberlin-Wellington Theater project working together with the Wilson Bruce Evans Home Historical Society is that there are scenes in the play that actually happen in the Wilson Bruce Evans house. So in this next scene that will be read by Joshua and Remsen Welsh, you'll meet John Copeland Sr. and his wife Delilah, who and Aoife imagines them at dinner at the Wilson Bruce Evans home together with other families, the Learys, and the Evanses and Joneses, who were all participants in the building of Oberlin, as well as many of them involved directly in the rescue. So this will be a scene between Delilah Evans Copeland and John Copeland Sr. And it tells you a little bit about how they got to Oberlin.
And I'm supposed to be a free woman, parading me around like a horse, a fine mare.
Here we go.
Nurse their children with milk from my breasts intended for my own.
Mm-hmm.
Work for food and clothing.
Mm.
2 fine frocks when company come and 2 gingham smocks when they don't. Dressed me up like a turkey and told me they had arranged for me to marry.
We did not come to all that.
We were strangers at first, thrown together by circumstance and our guardian's will. Free niggas, like royalty.
We did not know each other, let alone love each other. But that came in time.
He's not a bad looking fella.
Mm.
When that love blossomed, well, when our John was born.
3 years to the day. She hitched me up.
August 15th, 1834. Surely a sign of what can happen.
A sign of what? You married August 15th, 1831. A week later, Nat Turner. Less than 100 miles away, drove those white folks crazy. More codes, more laws, couldn't even carry a cane. Suspected even my carpentry tools. In before dark, 2 Sundays a month, violating the Sabbath, invading my home to search it.
Couldn't even visit my own sister.
I don't know why you would want to do that.
Free and still slaves. That piece of paper saying we're free was good only as long as white folk deemed it so. The writing was on the wall about that. Call on the protection of the very people who controlled us. Still we could endure, but our boys. John so wild and carefree. And Henry just a toddler running around after him, imitating everything his brother did. Your Uncle John had to work double hard just to keep us afloat.
I couldn't school him.
He needed the company of his kind, other children.
But 3 times they burned the colored schoolhouse to the ground.
So we determined to leave. We knew not where. Oh, the knots we had to twist ourselves into. John had his papa's will, but never having been a slave, I had no papers to prove I was not one. The only way to leave was to get a letter from the same white folk who had been content to run our lives and avail themselves of our service.
And keep our money. Had to get a letter.
A letter. If we were going to leave North Carolina and cross the outback through Western Virginia and Kentucky, well, we got not 1, but 27.
John is so intelligent, discreet, and sober-minded.
Delilah uniformly conducts herself with utmost propriety.
A fair and honest, industrious character.
Quiet, humble, and Christian-like in all matters.
Who on earth were they talking about?
And we set out.
In a caravan.
Who's telling this story? Thank you. In this next excerpt, Joshua will read as John Copeland Jr., one of the rescuers who was later hanged for his participation in John Brown's Harper's Ferry raid.
It all happened so fast. Kidnapped, isolated, the rescue, handed off from one rescuer to another. Driving free, got him free, but we had no plan. One rescuer to another. Grinnell to Fitch to Monroe to Fairchild to Jones to Evans to Meade to get him to Sheffield. And from there, to speed him across the depths of hell to Canada. How nefarious this power. Intent upon its inviolate preservation that we must go to such ends so fast. Let me share an account of the events that predate our rescue. Rescuers, they called us. First to the cause. Our rescue of one John Price was his second, for in the beginning, he did rescue himself. In the end, he did rescue me. And the fugitive we sought to save did not save us from ourselves.
Thank you, Joshua and Remsen. Remsen, why don't you come back on so we can thank you again? Remsen and Joshua are both seniors here at Oberlin College. They are Africana Studies, and in Remsen's case, also theater majors. So thank you. We're going to turn the program over now to Carol Lasser, Professor Emerita of Oberlin College and the manager of the Wilson Bruce Evans Home Historical Society. And before that, I would just like to say how much we have enjoyed working with them, that as you can see, Ifa Baeza is really gifted in bringing alive historical moments. As Eric mentioned, her recent trilogy about Emmett Till has been garnering amazing attention from its production in DC. So, and as you could tell, she loves music. So she's going to be working music and storytelling and action and really, really helping us to live with these incredible people from the 1850s right here in Oberlin. So without further ado, Carol Lasser will now tell you more about the Wilson Bruce Evans Home Historical Society's work.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Oh, I'm still muted. Thank you so much, Caroline. It's such a pleasure to be sharing this program with the Oberlin-Wellington Rescue Theater Project, a really an organization that will bring this exciting story to life for all of us. Most of you know something at this point about the Wilson Bruce Evans Home Historical Society. We are restoring the home of the of this African-American freeborn, North Carolina freeborn abolitionist. He was a member of the Underground Railroad, a member of the Oberlin-Wellington Rescue, and his just to reiterate, his brother-in-law, Lewis Sheridan Leary, as well as his nephew, John A. Copeland, were martyrs in the Harper's Ferry raid in 1859. We have had a really, really exciting couple of years. Most exciting is for us, the grant we received from the National Park Service Historic Preservation Fund, a Save America's Treasures Fund that gave us $283,250 in matching grants to really take a big role in rehabilitating the Wilson Bruce Evans house. But for reasons that you'll soon hear, our construction plans have slowed down a little bit. But here we are putting in our sign for the rehabilitation with the National Park Service logo, the front of the house, and take a good look at the back of the house there, because
Carol, we're not seeing the slides. You are.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
We're seeing the logo yet.
You're still seeing the logo. Okay. Thanks. Now you can only see me, right? Let's see. How about, can you see this?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
great. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so I'll go back a sec. Here's our lovely National Park Service sign, and here's a view of the back of the house. Keep that in mind, because our original rehabilitation plan, when we first came together as the Evans Home Historical Society in 2021, we gathered together Oberlin history enthusiasts as well as descendants of Wilson Bruce Evans, And it seemed to us pretty obvious what we wanted to do. We would demolish this badly deteriorating rear section of the house and replace it with a purpose-built construction that would house our educational center. And at the same time, we would also remove that badly deteriorating 1927 porch and put on what we thought would be an appropriate porch from the Civil War era, just the single bay entry. I hope you can see that. Well, that was indeed the plan. But as things worked out, not what we're currently involved in. We have had a lot of successes, a huge number. Off we went with these plans, and we got backing from the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom Program and National Park Service Program, which we joined the African American Civil Rights Network, another National Park Service another National Park Service program that we joined. We got grants from the Ohio State Historic Preservation Office, the Nord Family Foundation, the Nordson Corporation Foundation, the Bill Long Foundation in Oberlin, in addition to that, Save America's Treasures Grant. And with that, we put a new roof on the house, a cedar shingle, synthetic cedar shingle. We put in new electricity. The house had not had electricity for nearly 2 decades. We also put in a new furnace, new water line, new gas line, new safety alarm system. And we put together really an exciting and fabulous team to move forward with the renovation, including headed by our architect, Sandra Madison, who is the CEO and principal of Robert P. Madison International, the oldest Black architectural firm in the state of Ohio. She is currently the CEO, so it makes it really a unicorn, a Black African-American owned, female-owned architectural firm. We're working with wonderful historic preservation consultants, Wendy Naylor and Diana Wellman, and with an amazing forensic construction team, if you will, headed by Andy Clark of R.W. Clark of Cleveland. Andy Clark is pretty amazing. And what he began to find as he did some selective demolition in that rear portion of the house really changed our plans. We now believe that that badly deteriorated rear section is in fact the oldest section of the house. Andy found beams and timber. I think you can see over here the axe marks on this original timber. You can see over here the timber itself being used to hold up the roof in that rear portion. There's something called split lathe back here, also indicating that this is a very old building. Throughout that rear portion, deteriorating older beams are sistered. The roof of the building is put together in the form of an early 19th century barn, everything pointing towards the early construction of this, and confirmed by the findings of our amazing historic research team headed by Gary Kornblith. And I see Vikram, you're also on the call today. Thank you very much, Vikram Perry. That have documented changes in tax valuation of the house and the ways in which it was represented on sets of historic maps, all supporting this discovery. So we are now firmly convinced that this back portion, which originally we had thought we would simply demolish, really needs to be rehabilitated to tell part of the story. I want to take a brief detour. As we went to do this, we also had some exciting discoveries on the side. This lovely team here was rooting around in the attic of the old portion of the house, and that's our amazing Andy Clark on the left, and Oberlin's code administrator Chris Yates on the right, rooting around, and they came down with a box from the loft section of the house. They also found an old settee, a set of 19th century carpentry tools, 2 newel posts that we're fairly sure Wilson Bruce Evans made but never installed, and this box of hardware, which on closer examination turns out to be part of the kind of hardware that Wilson Bruce Evans would use when he was making coffins, his primary occupation as the years went on and his work evolved. And he became known in town as an undertaker. We think that maybe this brick house he built in the 1870s was part of the expansion of his work as an undertaker. All questions to be further researched as we move along here. So we rethought our plans. As I said, we're now going to rehabilitate that portion which appears on the right there in the middle, and instead of replacing it, we're going to use that to help to tell a more complex and more compelling story, we think, about this family and their move to Oberlin in 1854 and their evolution as they continued on. Right now, and you can also see we've decided that we will expand the front porch here to try to capture something of the look that the house had in 1887 when Wilson Bruce Evans built a porch onto the house. So right now we're waiting for approvals from the National Park Service for our building plans. There's plenty of work to be done. We will need to continue our fundraising and our analysis of the house, both of which have become more complicated, more complex, and bigger goals as we've moved along. And we're hoping in the meantime that you will stay tuned for more programs, including what we're hoping will be participatory programming, participatory interpretive programming, in which we turn to people interested in the house to help us decide what stories we need to tell in the house and how to tell them. So stay tuned, and we will be showing you more as the year moves on. It's now my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Phyllis Yarber Hogan, Vice President of the Wilson Bruce Evans Home Historical Society and a founding trustee of the society, as well as a founder of the Oberlin African American Genealogy and History Group. She is a gifted historian, a gifted educator, and she will be telling the story with about Henry Box Brown, particularly to children. And we have a special guest today who will help her granddaughter, Danae. So give me a minute while I reposition this is the box that we're going to be talking about, and it'll take me just a minute to reposition so you'll be able to see Ms. Yarber Hogan and Ms. Danae as we tell the story of Henry Box Brown. Ready? Okay. Hello, my name is Phyllis. Wow. Much love. Always challenging to tell the stories of found their road to children. The decision to try for freedom was not fun, nor was the game. You had to be willing to put your very life on the line. In the words of Henry Box Brown, I shall have my freedom for God in the tent. Today we're going to tell you the story using these two books, his narrative, the he wrote, and a book entitled Henry's Freedom Box by Ellen Levine and Adair Nelson. Okay. We're also going to be using the box, the replica of the box that was built by Michael and Callie James Oliver. And if the parents are willing, sometimes they can get into it. And for now, that's enough. Henry Box Brown was born enslaved in 1815 in Louisa County, Virginia. At age 15, Henry was taken to Richmond to work in a tobacco factory, and his enslaver promised him a portion of the money he earned. While in Richmond, Henry fell in love and married a woman named Nancy, who had a different slave owner.
Together, they had 3 children. Nancy and her children were sold to another slaveholder in Richmond, who threatened to sell Nancy and her children again unless Henry paid him money. Henry provided a home for his family and paid Nancy's enslaver whenever he demanded money. One day, while Henry was at work, his friend James came into the factory and whispered in Henry's ear, "Your wife and children were just sold at the slave market." "No," cried Henry. He couldn't think, he couldn't move. The boss said, "Twist that tobacco." The boss poked Henry. Henry twisted the tobacco leaves. His heart twisted in his chest. At lunchtime, Henry rushed to the center of town. A large group of slaves were tied together. The owner shouted at them. Henry looked for his family. "Father, father." Henry watched his children disappear down the road. Where was Nancy? He saw her the same moment she saw him. When he wiped away his tears, Nancy was gone. Henry no longer sang. He couldn't hum. He went to work, he ate, and he went to bed. He tried to think of happy times, but all he would see were the carts carrying away everyone he loved. Henry knew he'd never see his family again. Many weeks passed. One morning, Henry heard birds singing, and Henry thought about being free. But how? He lifted up a crate, and then he knew. He asked James, a friend of his, and Dr. Smith to help him. Dr. Smith was a white man who thought slavery was wrong. They met early the next day at an Indian warehouse. Henry arrived with the box. "I will mail myself to a place where there are no slaves," he said. James stared at the box and then at Henry and said, "What if you call and someone hears you?" Henry said, "I'll cover my mouth and hope." Dr. Smith wrote on the box to William H. Johnson, Arch Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Henry would be delivered to friends in Philadelphia. Then he printed on the crate in big letters, "This side up with care." Now Henry needed an excuse to stay home from work. James pointed to one of Henry's fingers. But Henry knew it wasn't bad enough. He opened up a bottle of acid. "No," cried James. Henry poured it on his hand. It burned his skin to the bone. Now his boss would have to let him stay home. Dr. Smith bandaged Henry's hands, and they arranged to meet at 4 o'clock the next morning. The sun was not yet up when Henry climbed into the box. "Ready," he said. James nailed down the lid. Dr. Smith and James drove to the station. The railway clerk tipped the box over and nailed the paper to the bottom. Dr. Smith begged the clerks to be careful, but they didn't listen. They threw the box into the luggage car. Henry, hours passed. Henry was lifted up and thrown again, upside down. He heard waves splashing. This must be the steamboat headed for Washington, D.C. The ship rode smoothly, but Henry was still upside down. Blood rushed to his head. His face got hot. His eyes ached. He thought his head would burst, but he was afraid to move. Someone might hear him. Thanks. I'm tired of standing, someone said. Why don't we move that box and sit on it, said another. Henry held his breath. Could they be talking about his box? Henry was pushed. The box scraped the deck. Now he was on his right side, now he was on his left. And suddenly he was right side up. What do you think is in here, said the first man. Mail, I guess, said the other. And I am mail, thought Henry, but not the kind they imagined. Henry was carried off a steamboat and placed in a railroad car. This time head up. He fell asleep to the rattling sound of the train wheels. He awakened to loud knocking. Henry, are you all right in there? All right, he answered. The cover was pried open. Henry stretched and stood up. Both men smiled at him. Welcome to Philadelphia. At last, Henry had a birthday, March 30th, 1849, his first day of freedom. And from that day on, he also had a middle name. Everyone called him Henry Box Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Danae, and thank you, Phyllis. I am pleased to say that Henry's box will be on exhibit at the Oberlin Public Library during Black History Month for brave children and their parents. And I wondered if I could just take 1 minute to ask Phyllis to talk a little bit about how children have reacted to the box since it was created in 2016. I also want to thank at this point Pally Davis Holliber and Michael Holliber for actually building this box. Phyllis, do you want to say a couple of things?
Well, I can say that I have put people in the box. I never put children in the box unless their parents are there and are willing to have it happen. And it's difficult because it is an experience, but it's not a real experience. But what children mostly want to know about Henry and his box is, how did he use the bathroom? So, and I can't answer that, and I don't even try.
So, Phyllis, I'm hoping that the box will come to the Evans home where we can use it to engage children in a really different level of understanding about the Underground Railroad.
It would be wonderful for it to be there, because I have a vision of lots of children coming through the Evans house, and it would be a perfect place for Henry's box, because they can touch it and they can see it and they can hear the story about Henry Box Brown.
Thank you, Phyllis, and thank you, Danae.
Come
You
here,
did a
Danae.
great job. Wave out there.
Wait.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back to you, Caroline and Eric, to take questions from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Let me get myself back on the screen. Eric, do you want to help me get back on the screen? Let's see. Well, that is so exciting to add Henry Box Brown to the types of experiences we're having, which can really help us understand the bravery of people who were able to escape from and protest against and eventually end slavery. Don't know if I'm on the screen. Let me just check and see. Well, now is the time that we wanted to set aside in case people have thoughts or wish to have discussion. And we were going to invite people if they wanted to, if anybody wants to put their camera on at this point, we're welcome to, we'd love to see you. And I see a few of you are here on camera. So nice to see you and welcome you. Hi, everybody. Oh, hello, Jean. Maybe if there aren't too many of us, we could take a moment and just say hello. So we kind of know who each other are. I see more people popping on. Does anybody like to say hello and let us know who you are?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I saw someone about to say hello.
This is Karen Schaefer. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Good to have this meeting. I'm delighted to be able to get this kind of information in a group setting like this. Thank you for doing it.
Exciting, very exciting. Karen, your work has always been so important to all of us. Would anybody else like to say hello or ask a question? Or there may be people here who also can contribute more historical information in addition to whatever you've heard today, or maybe you want to know more. I know that,
I
hi, Jean.
can introduce myself. Hello, everyone. I'm Jean Madison. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a full-time working actress and playwright. I came out of the corporate sector. You mentioned Sandra Madison. She is my cousin. She inherited the firm where she and her husband Kevin bought it out from my father, Robert P. Madison, who was in fact the first Black registered architect in the state of Ohio. My father's going to be 100 years old this year. He still lives independently. And he used to always say architects and conductors live the longest because no one will trust you with big works until you get older. Something to look forward to. I worked on the Oberlin Rescue Project script development this past summer with Aoife and a group of very talented actors from Cleveland and Oberlin. So I'm very happy to learn about this progress. I would love to, when I'm there next time, do some walking around campus and get a look at some of the historic sites. So we're collaborating on some future projects that I'm looking
Yes.
forward to. Thank you. This has
Thank
been
you,
very
Jean.
interesting.
I'm
Thank
glad
you,
you
Jean.
mentioned-
I just have to say that it's so exciting to meet you. Your father, of course, is legendary, and your cousin has just been such a supporter of the home and its renovation. We could not have done it without her. We gave her an award at the annual meeting this year in recognition of her leadership. So thank you. What a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much. I'll convey that to her. I'm surprised she's not on this call. We just got off another Zoom call planning Dad's 100th anniversary and the firm's 68th birthday.
Wow.
68th, 69th. It'll be 69 this year.
Remarkable. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm glad you mentioned walking around because many people may already know this who are in the call today, but there are some wonderful tours that are run by the Oberlin Heritage Center, where we can see a number of sites around town that were very important in the history of the Underground Railroad and abolition and the growth of the town. So I encourage people, when the weather's better, to come on out. And one of the things we're talking about in the long future of the Rescue of John Price show is that we're hoping at some point that we can tie in things like tours and other ways that people can experience the history together with the play. And as I know we've mentioned a couple of times, in June here on campus at Oberlin campus, we're going to do a workshop to let everyone in on the progress of the play. So I'm pretty excited about that. You could hear a little bit of what's going to be like. Would anybody else like to say hello or ask a question?
I could say hello. I'm Doug Edgerton. I'm a historian at Lemoyne College in frosty Syracuse, New York. And was actually finishing up a biography of Thomas Wentworth Higginson, who was one of John Brown's Secret Six and was deeply involved in the Anthony Burns failed rescue in Boston. I've known Gary and Carol and Craig Friend, who's also here for years. I've known Gary since I had brown hair and he had a ponytail. So we've been down in the trenches for a long time. Great program. Lovely to be here.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you could join us.
And if I may follow up, I'm the Craig Friend he just mentioned, and I'm a historian at North Carolina State University. And I'm finishing a biography of Lunsford Lane, who was a Black abolitionist who actually lived in Oberlin for several months on 2 separate occasions. And what I want to offer to you maybe in the future is I'm in Raleigh. And part of the story involves the Copelands and Camptons and Joneses in Raleigh. And I've actually discovered, the reason they fled Raleigh, is there was a 2-year purge undertaken by white people in Raleigh against Lunsford originally, and then several other free Black families, particularly those who owned property. And so I'd be happy to share that story with you sometime if you would wish. So
I think that would be amazing, because I was going to say, as soon as you introduce yourself, I was going to say that the dominance of North Carolinians in town at that period of time is quite noteworthy. And it's interesting, as you heard in the scene that Aoife wrote between Delilah and John Copeland Sr., that some of them were descendants of the slaveholders. Some of them had been freed before or were legitimately free to come. There were other people who did escape. So, but it made for a very rich community here. And I'm excited to hear you talk about the work you're doing. And it's amazing when you start studying the 1850s in Oberlin, the amount of people who came through here, the things that happened. It was, I always, like most people, I came here to teach 30-something years ago. And, most people have a general idea about Oberlin having this abolitionist history. But since I've been working as dramaturg on the play, doing a lot of the historical work, it is incredible to me, first of all, how many businesses people of color owned, how prominent they were in the town, what that relationship was like between the college and the different segments of townspeople. One of our favorite fun facts was that the Chauncey Wax Hotel was about where, if you've been to Oberlin, it was just a ways up Main Street, not too far from what the old train station now is, a community services center, but not too far from what's McDonald's now. And it was so close to what was the downtown, where there was the Teetotaler Hotel, and the Wax Tavern was all of the free living folks. And that was where the slave catchers were actually staying. And so it turns out that one of the Chauncey Wax houses is almost next door to the Wilson Bruce Evans house. So the more we dig into the history, the more exciting it becomes.
And if I can just throw one more thing in for you, Delilah is particularly interesting because as a free woman who basically raised the children in a white family, she had been to the North many times, and they had always taken her unconcerned that she would run away because she had a husband and children who were enslaved in Raleigh. And so they knew that she would never run. So she had actually traveled quite a bit before going to Ohio. So, yeah, they're interesting people.
Their home is preserved here too, the Copeland home. And I had a chance to visit there. It's still on most of the original acreage that it had. And the people who own it now are fighting to keep it together as one piece of property. But when Aoife, the playwright, and I went to visit and we stepped into the house, the woman who owns the house said, "You're in Delilah's kitchen." And in fact, there are parts of the house that have never been updated a lot. It's not the 19th century, but it's amazing how much the house is holding of its history. So we still have Delilah's house in town, in addition to the Wilson Bruce Evans house and other homes of the period. Anybody else like to say hello or ask a question? Yes,
I'd like to just
Professor
jump in here. Since you're talking about Oberlin in the 1850s and how remarkable it was, Vikram Perry, who's our research fellow, has been researching the East Mill area, which is now East Vine. And what we're finding, or he has found, is that you had both rescuers and people who testified against them at the trial living on the same block in 1858-59. So it really was, and it's a white and black neighborhood. It's really quite a fascinating example of the diversity of our unusual center of the universe.
It might be good to mention to people that Carol and Gary have written the book Elusive Utopia about the history of Oberlin that some of you may really want to read. Phyllis, I'm going to catch you off guard and say, is there anything else you'd like people to know about the work of the Genealogy Society? It's been such an important organization in town.
Well, we're now just coming back from the plague of COVID, and we're meeting, we have a hybrid meetings. We started that, and eventually, hopefully, we can go full-blown in-person meetings, but we're starting back. We've been going on, and probably it's well over 20 years, and we meet in the library, and we invite anybody that has an interest in African-American genealogy and history to come and participate. Everybody's welcome.
Thank you. It's a really vital, exciting organization. And I know some of our students have been able to be involved, which has been really, really valuable. Anybody else would like to say hello? We really appreciate all of you being here today. Hopefully the time will come sooner than later where if you don't live in Oberlin, you can come see the Wilson Bruce Evans House now that the beautiful sign is up and the work is beginning in earnest. It's quite an undertaking and is going to really make Oberlin even more of a destination. Something else we've been talking about in terms of building out the Oberlin-Wellington Rescue Theater project is not only how can we connect to things like tours or other sites like the Wilson Bruce Evans home, but how can we begin to be a destination for people who are really wanting to know more about this history and to keep on partnering with more and more people, not just in Oberlin, but in Lorain County and contiguous areas. One thing that fascinated me as we've been digging into this story is that from Sandusky all the way to Paynesville and maybe further along the lake were many places where people were able to get to Canada and where there was a reputation that slave catchers began to know, don't even go there. Don't even go to that part of Ohio because you won't come back with any people. In fact, you will be in danger. And so it surprised me if you know, I mean, the landscape going east toward Paynesville, that I wouldn't have known that even that was a stronghold of abolitionism. So it always strikes me as so ironic that the south of Ohio was the Mason-Dixon line and the northern border of Ohio was the leap to freedom in our relatively small state. And I think Oberlin is at such the center of what that history was. By the way, our founders, the founders of the Oberlin-Wellington Theater project, really the Spitzers, Pat Spitzer in particular has always been a devotee of Underground Railroad history, and she knows quite a bit about old architecture, about the history of the rescue and of other abolitionist activity. And the reason that she wanted to invest in this project is that she feels that in this divided time in America, that this historical event is really a template for how people can come together. She has really expressed her distress at how balkanized we are. And she feels like living in this time, not that this time was free of conflict. I mean, we're not trying to idealize it, but the fact is that some actions were taken that were quite brave. And how do we become those people now?
Caroline, Jean Madison asked a question about other slave rescues in Oberlin and I guess Karen Schaefer suggested that Gary Kornbluth might want to say a few things, but I would say that it was the most dramatic of the rescues, although there were, and Liz is nodding as well. Liz Schultz of the Oberlin Heritage Center has also done a great deal of work. My favorite is the story of the decoys who brought a wagon load of free people of color to Elyria, where they were held pending their indictment while the actual freedom seekers were spirited away because the authorities had been decoyed so effectively. And that included, the decoys included Sabram Cox, one of the most important Black leaders in Oberlin. And there are any number of other stories, but I think the story of the Oberlin-Wellington rescue is particularly dramatic because of its timing in 1858, because it brought out all of the political as well, the political overtones that had been simmering beneath the surface, and because it was a mobilization in which Oberlin, which was known for being quote unquote nonviolent, really came to the edge of a physical confrontation that's later realized in 1859 when several important Oberlin people joined with John Brown. So just to start to answer that question, Jean, I don't know if Gary wants to add a couple of things or Liz wants to add a couple of things. There were a lot of important rescues. Gary, choose only one.
No, I actually want to point everyone to Liz, who for years has been working on a history of the Underground Railroad in Oberlin, and who is a remarkably generous sharer of knowledge. And she has, I think, the most complete list of different incidents and possible incidents. It's sometimes hard to nail this information down. You know, people didn't keep guest books of who came through on the Underground Railroad. But we now, largely thanks to the work that Liz and other folks connected to the Heritage Center have done, we know a lot more about the specifics. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Liz, and say, you know, so it's director at OberlinHeritageCenter.org, I believe, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And I'll just give you the broad strokes of the other two incidents, although there were a couple throughout Oberlin's history, but one, as I said in the chat box, was of, they were at least known by Jefferson and Jane Johnson. We don't know if those were their real names or not, but they were nearly kidnapped from town. The slave catchers actually got to the outskirts in another community before townspeople rallied and caught up with them at another house. And they all went to jail to await kind of a decision on what was supposed to be happening, you know, what the charges were, what evidence people had. And they actually escaped in the middle of the night. So that was, they thwarted the slave catchers. And the other one was also in 1858, the Wagoner family. And basically slave catchers went to their home, and I'm really shortening the story, but basically Mr. Wagoner made a deal about having a shotgun, and the slave catchers skedaddled. So another thwarted kidnapping attempt. But I think one of the themes of those stories is also that there tended to be more of those attempts when they had pro-Southern sympathizers in the position of marshals, deputy marshals, or people in authority. So whenever you had someone like that in charge, Oberlin was more likely to have kidnapping attempts. So there were a couple others, but they were not successful. But Carol was right. The Oberlin-Wellington rescue is the one that kind of made the national news and really brought this to everyone's attention. But yes, if you have questions, do feel free to reach out to the Heritage Center. And I'm just going to throw in a plug that it is so wonderful to have both of these projects going on with the Evans Home and the play production. And you may not get to hear it, but I get to hear from a lot of community members, like, what's happening? What's the latest update? There is just a lot of great energy happening right now about these stories and these legacies and how important they are to tell. So thank you to everyone who's been part of this program today.
Well, I don't think any of us could be doing it without you, Liz, honestly. I think we're coming right on to 5 o'clock, and we promised we would end our program within an hour. Any last thoughts, Carol, Eric? Or
I just want to say thank you to everyone who made it possible, and for the large number of friends and acquaintances who I see on here. I hope we'll all be following up. Special thanks to Doug and to Craig Friend, who, as scholars in the field, it's especially lovely to see you. And Craig, we need to make sure that we get that, you know, the travel log, the North Carolina Oberlin connection going. So, the Underground Railroad is, of course, an international story, so we need to enlist our friends in Canada as well. But thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Liz. It's really a pleasure to work together and to bring new stories about Black history to Oberlin.
Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for more information coming your way.
Bye.